I just hope that this talk has shown how modern interpretations of witchcraft draw at least a little from the stereotype that was formed in the early modern period. For it was in that time that aspects of gender, age, black clothing, pointed hats, animal familiars, cauldrons, flying on broomsticks, and bewitchment took root.
Next we have John Fulton, who's in his second year of his PhD, University of Ulster. We're all at the University of Ulster, where I teach history as well, I should have said. Oh, there we go, University of Ulster. And John is going to talk about Mary Butters, the Witch of Carmoney, a intriguing episode in the early 19th century. So we're moving from European and English witchcraft to right up the road. Okay, thank you very much. John.
Thanks, Carl. I'd just like to show a few maps before we start, in case anyone doesn't know where Carmoney is. I'm sure he's already, just in case no one's local in the area. So the top arrow there shows Carrickfergus. The bottom arrow is Belfast, and the middle one is the parish of Carmoney, and that's in relation to County Antrim. The second map there just showing the road network. This map was drawn in 1812, so you can see the MT Road wasn't built in. So basically the road in and out of Belfast, and hopefully it'll become apparent why this is important really, this road to Belfast. So at Carmoney in August 1807, 3 people lost their lives because of the actions of a woman attempted to magically counteract a bewitchment. After the milk of a cow owned by a local man named Alexander Montgomery failed to turn into butter, a number of local women attributed the cow's ailment to witchcraft, and a selection of supernatural remedies were prescribed in order to counteract the witch's spell. After various attempts to reverse the bewitchment failed, the Montgomery household employed the services of Mary Butters, a well-known wise woman from Carrickfergus. Deploying a range of magical skills to break the incantation, Butters' final attempt resulted in the death of 3 individuals who resided at the Montgomery household. Both Alexander Montgomery's wife and son were dragged from the house where the charm had been performed, while a further individual named Margaret Lee died a short time after being rescued. Although Butters was removed from the scene unconscious, she was revived on, quote, a dung heap outside the house and survived. Committed to prison, Mary stood trial at the Spring Assizes of Carrickfergus in 1808 and was later discharged by proclamation. In her defence, she claimed that a black man, a supernatural being, had appeared in the house and attacked the victims with a club, killing all 3 and Mary injuring herself. However, the coroner's inquest concluded suffocation as the cause of death due to poisonous gases released into the room where the charm had been performed. After her release, Mary returned to live in Carrickfergus. Although official prosecutions for witchcraft ceased during 1711, which Andrew's book demonstrates, the threat of bewitchment continued to cause concern well into the 19th century and beyond. The supernatural precautions taken during the Carmoney witchcraft affair demonstrate how traditional witchcraft fears had undergone little alteration from the early modern period, 1550 to 1750. The survival of such popular notions concerning the failure of butter production involved the belief that livestock had been bewitched. This opinion was, quote, unfortunately instilled into the mind of Montgomery's wife, and was further confirmed by the, quote, testimony of every old woman in the parish, each of whom contributed her story of what she had seen in former times. This diagnosis was offered to the Montgomerys by various individuals present at the Carmoney affair, and it was presumed that these ailments resulted from the butter witch's use of malevolent magic. Contrary to orthodox medicine, those who practice these alternatives believe that before recovery from illness could take place, unnatural forces must be expelled from the bewitched before physical and spiritual balance can be restored. The range of supernatural treatments was then designed to aid the transference of these forces onto someone or something else. In Ireland, butter witches were commonly perceived as individuals with a magical ability to transform into animals, such as hares, and spoiled butter production by bewitching not only cattle, but also agricultural equipment such as mixing tools and churns. The Carnmoney witchcraft case involves this popular belief in the power of butter witches and their ability to interfere with agriculture. Before the services of Mary Butters were acquired at Carnmoney, various other women, who were in actuality magical practitioners, attempted to reverse the bewitchment. 12 other women were employed, quote, as the enchantment or spell could only be removed by those whose knowledge and skill in witchcraft had already been established. These women were cow doctors or charmers with more limited knowledge and skills than a local common person. In England, common folk were predominantly men and practiced magic in order to supplement their main incomes. In Scotland, although many male gender stereotypes are found, magical healers were named charmers and were predominantly women. Owing to her widespread reputation for magic, range of supernatural skills, and the fact that she specialised in bewitchments suggests that Butters was a more multifaceted common person who offered a range of magical services. A comparative with common folk in England suggests that cure and bewitchment was generally the most expensive service provided by common persons, and since these alternatives required knowledge of herbal medicine and witching powers, many were consulted over matters concerning livestock. Butters' reputation was therefore gained through extensive knowledge of the supernatural and a reputation for cure and bewitchments, generating both personal income and considerable social respect. Various methods of counter magic are used at Carnmoney witchcraft incident. 12 old women were, quote, impaneled to try their skill with the cow. However, after these measures failed, Butters' initial attempt at reversing the bewitchment consisted of mixing herbs with the milk of the afflicted cow. However, this practice resulted in the illness of 3 men who drank the concoction. Furthermore, after receiving orders to, quote, stop the chimney and every crevice that could admit air closed up, a sulphurous substance was burnt in order to neutralise the witch's spell. This type of counter magic has also been documented in Scotland during 1772, in a clockroom in the parish of Maghera in 1836, and Newton Ards in County Down in January in 1871. Like the Carnmoney affair, the incident at the clockroom in Newton Ards involved counter magic and the bewitchment of cattle. For example, a man involved in the incident at Newton Ards narrowly escaped suffocation after sealing all windows and doors and placing sods over the chimneys while boiling a pot of milk together with pins and 3 packets of needles. Some other popular contemporary superstitions involve rowan timber and the Neolithic flintstone, considered to be elf shot or fairy dust, like this example on the board. So interestingly, these beliefs and practices were observed by all denominations, although many of these counter magical practices used in Protestant regions of 19th century Ireland were transported through the migratory settlement patterns of the early modern period. The lengths that the Montgomerys went to in order to ensure the recovery of the animal are connected with wider economic concerns. Exacerbated by an impoverished countryside due to a reduction in farming prices and the dissemination of the domestic land industry, the labouring classes relied heavily on maintaining healthy livestock. Common folk such as Mary Butters benefited from the importance of maintaining healthy animals and offered magical services to guard against attacks from butter witches and malevolent fairy activity. The common person was both a vital asset to the rural community and a part of the local economy. This example of witchcraft and popular magic at Carnmoney in 1807 is not only reflective of the wider religious and alternative beliefs of the Protestant peasantry, but also of the broader environment in which they lived. The parish of Carnmoney consisted of 2 socio-economic zones. To the east, Monkstown and the villages of Whitehouse and White Abbey were principally the manufacturing districts and subsequently housed the greater proportion of the working classes. To the north and west, Carnmoney village mainly consisted of farmers, cottagers and agricultural labourers. Owing to its close proximity to Belfast, valuable farming in contemporary Carnmoney predominantly involved trading with customers in Belfast. The farming community were therefore almost totally reliant on the sale of their buttermilk and pork, which necessitated the need to maintain healthy livestock and created anxieties concerning witchcraft and the threat of bewitchment. Just a few conclusions. Considered in this paper has been both the extent of supernatural belief in Carmody during the early 19th century and the parallel belief in the abilities of various women to counteract witchcraft and bewitchments. Recourse to counter magic has served to demonstrate contemporary notions of the existence of other witches and their ability to bewitch livestock. The religious and socio-economic influences within the parish of Carmody have shown how these factors contributed to the countermeasures taken to reverse the bewitchments and counteract malevolent magic. Furthermore, the gender and social class of those involved in the incident was fundamentally connected with wider economic influences that involved unstable employment patterns for women and a total dependence on agricultural productivity. These factors combined to create the necessary conditions for witchcraft incidents to occur. However, one final consideration is necessary. As previously mentioned, Mary Butters was discharged by proclamation after the jury at the Spring Assize in 1808 returned a guilty verdict. This begs the question, why was Butters acquitted? Historians of the 18th century Irish legal system have suggested that assize justices were reluctant to convict women and that their socio-economic position and perceived psychological vulnerability acted as a deterrent for returning criminal convictions. As some other scholars have demonstrated, how female suspects could be discharged if insanity was considered the reason the crime was committed. Furthermore, both the upheavals of the 1798 rebellion and the subsequent Act of Union with the English Parliament in 1801 fundamentally changed the social and religious landscape in Ireland, especially in areas more predisposed to Presbyterianism, such as Carmody and Carrickfergus. Moreover, during this time, increasing evangelical competition furthered the theological, ideological and cultural separation from what was perceived as Roman Catholic superstitions. Finally, the legacy of the Islandmagee witchcraft affair and mass trial at Carrickfergus in 1711 dictated that the region retained a lively relationship with witchcraft and the supernatural. This relationship lasted deep into the 20th century. Thanks very much.
Now we have Jodie Shevlin. Jodie is going to talk about demonic possession, exorcism and Catholic clergy, and brief famine Ireland. I'll pass you over to Jodie.
Before I start, I'd just like to show you a map of what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about Wexford, and the little star is Killinnick in Barony of Forth. That's from the 1885 Wexford County Guide and Directory. During the summer of 1824, local and national newspapers reported both a horrible fanaticism and dreadful occurrence which occurred in County Wexford regarding an alleged exorcism that ended in a murder trial. As details of the tragedy spread, questions were raised about the extent of influence and control Catholic priests maintained over people's minds. In addition, the response of the authorities and wider contemporary social, political and religious developments are significant factors which need to be considered in an effort to understand the event. I'll briefly outline the case using the trial reports and newspaper accounts before addressing the contextual developments. On the night of the 9th of July in 1824 in the parish of Killinnick, County Wexford, quote, a miracle was thought to have been wrought. The local Catholic priest, Reverend John Carroll of Ballymore, with a crowd numbering 50 people, visited a man named Henry Neal who was lying ill with apoplexy. Upon his arrival, Carroll declared the man was possessed with devils. He jumped on the man several times and asked those present to keep him in prayer so as to dispossess the sick man with the devils. As a result of the effects of Carroll's operations, a bystander, Peggy Danby, fell to the ground in hysterics. Mr. Carroll, quote, jumped off Neil's body, seized the woman in a violent manner, alleged that she too was full of devils, and called out to Jesus to assist him in expelling them. He trampled on the unfortunate woman, broke several of her ribs and left her for dead. Blood was gurgling in the poor woman's throat, and some of the superstitious wretches who were looking on then who saw the devils come out from her. priest then left the house and went to a bridge 400 yards away, where he buried the devils which he had claimed he had secured. On his return he exclaimed, quote, he had buried the reptiles in hell. John Carroll then went to the nearby house of Robert Moran and struck his wife so violently and repeatedly that when he left her, she was scarcely able to speak and her head was swelled to a shocking degree. The next house the priest went to was that of Thomas Sinnott. Neither Thomas nor his wife were at home. One newspaper records that the devil killer asked the servant of the house to fetch the mistress, and while he was waiting on the lady to return, a child of 3 or 4 who was in a bed in the same room as the priest began to cry. When the lady of the house returned, he asked for refreshments and told her there was a devil in the child. The priest then jumped on the bed on top of the infant and proceeded in the same manner as he had done on Henry Neale. The child, quote, cried out piteously, save me, save me. The father had returned and entered the room at this point and was making his way to the child, but, quote, some of the miserable fanatics present actually held him back. One leading English newspaper asks who was holding the mother. No one. She was as free as any of the spectators.